What if I told you the deadliest conflict in human history wasn't just fought on battlefields, but in the skies, the seas, and in the very hearts of ordinary people? This is the story of World War II, a war that reshaped our world forever. How did one of the most destructive wars in history begin? Our story starts not in 1939, but at the end of World War I. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was meant to bring peace. Instead, for Germany, it brought humiliation and economic ruin. The country was forced to accept blame for the war, pay massive reparations, and give up territory. This created a deep well of resentment, a wound that would fester for years. Into this climate of anger and despair stepped a charismatic and ruthless figure, Adolf Hitler. He promised to restore Germany's greatness, to reclaim its lost lands, and to create a powerful new empire. His Nazi ideology, built on a foundation of nationalism and racial hatred, captivated a nation desperate for a savior. Hitler's promises resonated, and by 1933, he was the leader of Germany, systematically dismantling democracy and rebuilding the military in open defiance of the Versailles Treaty. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, another empire was on the rise. Japan, driven by its own imperial ambitions and a need for resources, began an aggressive expansion into Asia. In 1937, it launched a full-scale invasion of China, marking a brutal chapter in the lead-up to the global conflict. The world watched, but did little. Appeasement became the policy of the day, as leaders in Britain and France hoped to avoid another war by giving in to Hitler's demands. But Hitler's ambitions were limitless. The final straw came on September 1st, 1939. German forces stormed across the border into Poland, using a new, terrifying tactic called blitzkrieg, or lightning war. 2 days later, Britain and France, honoring their alliance with Poland, declared war on Germany. The spark had ignited a firestorm. World War II had officially begun. The early years of the war were a whirlwind of German victories. Using the blitzkrieg strategy, Nazi forces overran Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Belgium. The unthinkable happened in June 1940. France, a major Allied power, fell in just 6 weeks. Hitler stood in Paris, the master of continental Europe. Britain now stood alone, an island fortress against the Nazi tide. What followed was the Battle of Britain, a ferocious air campaign where the Royal Air Force fought desperately against the German Luftwaffe. London and other cities endured the Blitz, a relentless bombing campaign designed to break the British spirit. But the spirit did not break. Across the Atlantic, the United States remained officially neutral. President Franklin D. Roosevelt knew the danger, but the American public was wary of being dragged into another European war. However, America was the arsenal of democracy, supplying the Allies with crucial weapons and supplies. This delicate neutrality was shattered on a quiet Sunday morning. On December 7, 1941, Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. The next day, America declared war on Japan, and a few days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States. The conflict was now truly global. While the West grappled with this new reality, the largest and deadliest front of the war was already raging in the East. In June 1941, Hitler betrayed a non-aggression pact with Joseph Stalin and invaded the Soviet Union. This was a war of annihilation, a brutal clash of ideologies between Nazism and communism. The Eastern Front became a vast meat grinder, consuming millions of lives on both sides. From the deserts of North Africa, where British and American forces battled Germany's famed Afrika Korps, to the icy depths of the Atlantic, where U-boats hunted Allied convoys, the world was at war. Key battles became legends. The Battle of Stalingrad saw the German Sixth Army encircled and destroyed, a devastating blow to Hitler's war machine. In the Pacific, the Battle of Midway turned the tide against Japan, crippling its naval power. By 1943, the tide was slowly turning. The Allies, now a mighty coalition including Britain, the Soviet Union, and the United States, began to push back. Italy, Germany's main ally in Europe, was invaded and switched sides, forcing German troops to fight on yet another front. Resistance movements blossomed across occupied Europe. Brave men and women risked everything to sabotage German operations, gather intelligence, and help fallen Allied airmen. This was a total war, fought not just by soldiers, Women entered factories in unprecedented numbers, building the planes, tanks, and ships that would win the war. At Bletchley Park, brilliant codebreakers, including many women, cracked Germany's unbreakable Enigma code, giving the Allies a priceless advantage. The ultimate turning point in the West came on June 6, 1944, D-Day, the largest amphibious invasion in history. Over 150,000 Allied troops stormed the beaches of Normandy in France. It was a day of incredible bravery and immense sacrifice, but it established the crucial second front that Stalin had been demanding for years. With the Allies pushing from the west and the massive Soviet armies advancing relentlessly from the east, the walls began to close in on Hitler's empire. The Red Army, having turned the tide at Stalingrad and Kursk, drove the Germans out of the Soviet Union and began the long, bloody march towards Berlin. The end was now in sight. By early 1945, Allied forces had crossed the Rhine River into Germany, while the Soviets were at the gates of Berlin. The German capital became the final desperate battlefield in Europe. In his bunker deep beneath the city, Adolf Hitler, the man who had plunged the world into war, realized his dream of a 1,000-year Reich had crumbled to dust. On April 30th, 1945, he took his own life. A week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. Victory in Europe was declared. But the war wasn't over. In the Pacific, Japan fought on with ferocious determination. Facing the prospect of a bloody invasion of the Japanese mainland that could cost millions of lives, the new U.S. President, Harry Truman, made a fateful decision. On August 6, 1945, an American B-29 bomber dropped a new, terrifying weapon, the atomic bomb, on the city of Hiroshima. 3 days later, a second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. The devastation was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Faced with this unimaginable power, Japan surrendered on August 15, 1945. World War II was finally over. The aftermath was staggering. The world was left to count the cost. Over 60 million lives lost, entire cities turned to rubble, and economies shattered. The full horror of the Holocaust was revealed, a systematic genocide that forever stained the conscience of humanity. In the Nuremberg trials, Nazi leaders were held accountable for their crimes against peace and humanity, establishing the principle that even in war, there are lines that cannot be crossed. To prevent such a catastrophe from ever happening again, the United Nations was born, a new forum for global cooperation. But the alliance that had won the war soon fractured. The United States and the Soviet Union, two superpowers with opposing ideologies, entered into a new kind of conflict. The Cold War. The shadow of World War II continues to shape our politics, our technology, and our understanding of good and evil to this day. The story of World War II is a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty, but also of our capacity for courage, sacrifice, and resilience. If this story moved you, and you want to see more powerful histories brought to life, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Thank you for watching.